Welcome back to BAS 120. We're going to talk about Chapter 3, Visualization and Exploring Data. So some of the topics we're going to cover is data visualization, data queries and sorts, some statistical methods to summarize data, and then we're going to talk about, within Excel, some of the pivot tables. Just what you're looking at here is a visual depiction of airplane traffic. So there's, I think, some examples I give you in later videos where we show where you can actually see that pattern over time, and you see, the East Coast, the West Coast, and then it's interesting at night you see Memphis open up with FedEx traffic, etc. Lots of new tools, lots of interesting ways to communicate and visualize data. So, data visualization, what is it? Well, it's a way of communicating information. You'll see in a minute 70-80% of what we absorb is visually. So how we communicate that and how we visually present it to make sure our messages come across is very important. And it's important because communication and knowledge are important, understanding this. Now, visualization, even though the tools are very new, it goes back. People were drawing maps in caves or where the animals are, the dangerous animals. But visualization of information is not new. It's just become much more advanced, as you can see with Google Maps, all sorts of Google tools and other tools to communicate information. As we said, studies show 70-80% of human sensory receptors are visual. So that's the primary sense that we get information from, is visual, looking at it, presenting it. So presenting the data is very important, how we take this data and present it. So a couple trends, recent trends is infographics. As you can see an example down here, hopefully a lot of you have seen this. This is job growth rate, and you can see the pictures and the happy faces and the smiling faces. So you instantly convey some of the messages that registered nurses are going to be in high demand. Some of the lower demands might be physicians. It gives you the annual, all the information very quick, graphically interesting. It draws you in, etc. Another big trend is interactive data. Allows you, or time series, allows you to interact with the data, change what you want to look at. For those, this is an example of planethunters.org, where you can help find new planets. Very interesting site where they depict different data. So let's talk about, since we're using Excel in this class, let's talk about some of the powerful set of tools and options we have. Now, there's example videos on each one, but you've got all sorts of charting information, and with each version of Excel, they're going to come out with the time series stuff, more and more ways to depict your data. Let's talk about some steps. How do we put all of this together if we're trying to communicate it either in a report or a presentation? I think there are 4 key steps. First of all, you need to understand the goal of the communications or the goal of the presentation. What couple of things messages do you want your audience to remember in the future? What tool? What's the best way to communicate that? Is it charts? Is it visual? Is it infographics? Is it interactive? What's the best way to do that? Whatever you choose as a tool, you want to make it easy on your audience by highlighting what your point is. And lastly, keep it simple. So the goal, normally folks think about what 2 or 3 messages do we want our audience to remember. Most folks in a report or in a presentation, they're going to remember a couple of things. They're not going to remember the whole thing. Once you identify those messages, you want to make sure you explain why that's important to your audience and what actions, how can they use the data. Remember, the whole course on business analytics is how do we aid managers to make decisions. So we've got to explain to that why the data is important. And then how the data supports these key messages. Lots of different tools, bar graphs, column charts, normally used to compare different variables. Pie charts are used often for ratios or parts of a whole. Line charts tend to be very good for if we're looking at growth patterns over time or trends. A lot of this is trial and error, trying to see which one communicates your information in your data best. The third step is to make sure you highlight your point. Oftentimes we get so engrossed in what we're doing, we forget to keep it simple and highlight what the point is. So lots of folks, I recommend you just tell us, either at the top bar or a bottom bar. So if they don't understand all of this, at least we understand what you're trying to tell us. So this chart's telling us promising declines in childhood obesity. That's the message. That's what they want us to remember. And here's the data that supports that statement. So you can see 13% reduction in Mississippi, etc. So they've got what their message is and some of the data that supports it. And it's very simple. And that's the last step, is to keep it simple. Relatively large fonts, easy to understand data, avoid long sentences, have some backup if they need additional information, and organize the flow of your material around your key messages. So, what about data queries and sorts? How do we take all of this data and query it so that we can depict what the key messages are in our data, or the key conclusions? Their example videos is part of this chapter that show you exactly how to sort the data, how to do Pareto analysis, how to do auto filters, how to do pivot tables, how to do pivot charts. All of these are going to be key ways within Excel and the Excel add-ins for you to sort and slice and depict the data to find out what the key messages are in that data. Let's talk a little bit about some statistical methods to summarize data. What are some ways we can summarize? Well, again, there are examples of each one of these detailed Excel videos, but you've got frequency distributions, which show you how the data is sorted by different bins, and you can control those bins. You've got cumulative frequencies that add those frequencies up so you can see, where's my 80th percentile, etc. You can take frequency distributions and put them into a histogram chart, which shows another way to show you the data. You can put the data into quartiles so you can see where the different quarters are. All sorts of statistical methods to help you communicate the data. And there's examples of each one of these. Finally, let's talk about exploring pivot tables, because I think a lot of you folks you're going to want to understand the power of the pivot table, because it actually gives the user of your information some ability to do their own questioning and their own sorting if they understand. So it takes the data. Again, there's lots of examples, but it allows your audience to filter and change the data that's viewed and sorted. So if the manager says, well, gee, I'd like to see it in this region rather than that region, a few clicks of the button, they can get the data sorted the way they want. You can add a lot of charting capability with pivot tables within charts, and it's a very powerful Excel tool. So we've talked about the visualization of data, why it's important, what it is, how to do data queries and sorts, some statistical methods we use to summarize data, and how to use pivot tables. Just the learning objectives for Chapter 3, we talked about charts, choosing the appropriate chart, sorting data sets, Pareto principles, the auto filters, frequency distributions. There are examples of each one of those in the series, percentiles and quartiles, pivot tables to summarize data, pivot tables and cross tabulations, and pivot tables using pivot charts. So a lot of this will be done by checking out all the example videos. There's an example for everyone that's in the book. Hope this helps. If there's any questions, let me know.